Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball!
Welcome back again, folks who are the vast audience of the Don Sullivan Show, to a very, very special episode of the Don Sullivan Show, the show where we discuss all things science, technology, and computing under a very, very broad umbrella with the intention of being able to communicate to the average American, the average student, science student of Western civilization in a way that they can understand and absorb and everything else along the lines of learning about science, technology, and computing. We have a very broad outlook on science, technology, and computing here. And you know that we've done episodes with on very, very high-tech computing, as well as episodes that are real-time with me running up and down mountains and canyons and Steve interjecting, and the other things that are a lot more off the beaten path, so to speak, that you would at first glance not necessarily think that they should fit under a science heading. But you know what? The paradigm of so much of what we do in this world, the real paradigm of how we think, and we're going to have an episode specifically on how Sir Francis Bacon actually transformed the philosophy of natural philosophy, which was science, into the idea of productization somewhere around 500 years ago. But this all can fit in under the umbrella of science. And today we are going to discuss the sport, the endeavor, the hobby, and the history of pinball. Now, this is really, really interesting. And unfortunately, neither Peter Townsend nor Elton John could join us for commentary. So we will make veiled references to their absence as we move along here. But we have a true pinball wizard, a true expert in pinball, Mr. Joshua Francis. Say hello, Josh.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us so much from the great rainy state of Washington and Seattle. And Josh, are you rooting in the Super Bowl here? Are you a fan of the Seahawks? Are you going to be rooting for Darno soon?
I am. I don't usually follow football super closely, but you know, it's the Seahawks. I'll definitely be watching the game.
Okay, well, we're going to get to the actual questions about pinball here in a minute, and this is really fascinating stuff, folks. You probably wouldn't think there's a lot to it, but it's amazing once you start getting into some depth in it. Steve, say hello, and let's do some promotion.
Absolutely. Greetings from the Garden State, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. Learn more at licensefortress.com. And please support our producer by visiting axtinc.com. That's AXTINK.com. Subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation and get his rug back from that rich philanthropist with the same last name. Back to you, Don.
Oh, yeah, I need to hear about that one offline, don't I? Okay.
He's always getting into these situations. I don't know.
Well, Steve, don't we also have a special announcement here about the new offerings of the Don Sullivan Show?
Absolutely. The Don Sullivan Show will be offering corporate podcast sponsorships moving forward, where for a price we can produce a podcast specifically designed to assist with your branding and marketing needs. And there will be more information about that up on the website soon.
Yeah, and if you're interested, just contact me at don@zxanalytics.com, and we will get you recorded and produce a tremendous episode that you can use at your discretion as soon as possible. All right, got to read out the waiver, the legal waiver. Got another lawyer the other day that absolutely agreed that we need to read out this waiver every time. So here we go. All statements by the hosts and guests on the Don Sullivan Show are the personal opinions of the host and the guests, all who agree that the following content is the property of Xanalytics LLC to be used publicly and exclusively on the Don Sullivan Show. All right, let's get going. As we said, the Don Sullivan Show is renowned now for covering huge umbrella of sciences. And that particular idea is going to be exemplified on this show, I think, maybe more than any other one that we've done so far in the last year plus that we've been doing this show, as we discuss the sport, the endeavor, the hobby of pinball. So welcome, Joshua Francis, a true pinball wizard. And not to overuse the cliche, but, we are going to overuse it because we have fun in this show. So pinball, as a competitive endeavor, started sometime in the 1940s during the World War II with it. It was amazing technology for the period, which Josh is about to explain to us a little bit. And it reached its popularity, or at least its real popularity, in the 70s and 80s, but it never really faded. So much so that there is an amazing renaissance of classic pinball with museums, enthusiasts, sponsored tournaments, serious competition all over the country. Josh, you were a pinball wizard, a pinball champion, an overall expert. So tell the audience about some of the history that you know of and the present culture of pinball.
Yeah, so pinball, or I should more clarify, kind of what we know as pinball today, was originally just kind of a table with a bunch of pins in it and a spring-loaded plunger, and you'd use that plunger to send a ball up and sometimes around the machine, and it would land in little pockets that just had numbers written on the playfield itself. Then you just had to manually add up the score, and there was no significant interactivity to it. It was just, how hard do you plunge, and you can kind of move and bump the game a little bit, but there's especially as time went on, they added features that would indicate if you moved it too much, and it would disqualify you. So
the disqualification is when you get a tilt?
So yes, and what exactly a tilt means for an individual playthrough of a game has changed a little bit over time. Originally, it was when you got a tilt, it was just a little visual indicator, and it didn't change anything about the game. You could still continue to play, you could still continue to plunge the balls, but as as pinball became a little bit more familiar with or a little bit more like what we're familiar with now, it would actually, once flippers were involved, it would actually prevent you from being able to play out the rest of the game. If you move it too much, it just ends the game right then and there. More recently, you can move the game, and you would get warnings. It wouldn't actually end the game outright right away. It would start to kind of give you a warning, and typically you'd get 2 warnings before it would end the ball in play, rather than
so
just
there's a threshold
the
of pressure of some kind in which, if you hit it too hard, you move it too hard.
And there's a couple of different ways that can be tracked. The main tilt bob is what it's called, is essentially is what looks like a small pendulum with a conical weight at the bottom, and there's a little ring around that cone, and there's a wire that's connected to that ring and a wire that's connected to the rod that that weight is attached to. And if you move it enough, that cone will hit the side of the ring and complete a circuit, and then that will either tilt the ball or give you a warning, depending on the era of the game.
This is built into the machine. This isn't like there's a ref there throwing a flag.
Correct.
That it's
Correct.
built into the machine.
It is built
That's
into the game. It will, on the older games, most of the lights will turn off, and when you hit the flipper buttons, they won't do anything, and none of the mechanisms will score until the ball drains, and then either if it's a tilt ends game, you're just done. But if it's a game that the tilt just ends the ball in play, once the ball comes back down, it'll let you plunge the ball again and continue playing.
Interesting. So is that considered like cheating? Well, obviously, if you do it too much, the game will shut off anyway. But like, how is that viewed? Do players? Is it normal to be kind of hitting hard in these types of
It's a physical game, so any kind of interaction, manipulation by bumping or moving the game, most of it is allowed. There's a couple of specific examples where it's not allowed, but moving the machine is absolutely part of playing pinball. It's one of the skills that players will develop and practice and work on, and that weight on the tilt bob, it can be adjusted up or down, and because it's a cone shaped, the further up it is, the closer it is to that ring that it's sitting in, so the less movement is necessary to cause it to complete that circuit. So it
more
makes
sensitive.
Yes, more sensitive. It makes it a tighter tilt, so you can't move it as much, and that's one of the big ways that an operator or an arcade may adjust the difficulty on any given machine.
Is there Steve, a standard tightness or sorry, Don, I'm just curious. Like for example, in the NFL, they're only allowed to, there's a certain the air that's in the football, there has to be a certain amount. There's kind of a standard. Is there a standard threshold that the tilt detector is set at for tournaments or something like that?
They tend to be certainly for major tournaments and bigger tournaments, they tend to be set much tighter than you might find at just some random arcade. It's really hard to set a standard because it is a physical weight, and it's metal on metal. It's the metal rod hanging on a metal bracket. So as that wears down and as the game gets older and as dust is introduced and things like that, it might respond just slightly differently. So it's usually when tournament directors are setting the tilt, they'll oftentimes just adjust it to where they think it might be right, and then just try moving the game and seeing how it responds. So
Josh, you've mentioned this. You've mentioned tournament, and Steve, you mentioned referees before. So Josh, you go to these big tournaments, state tournaments, and I think there's even national tournaments now, probably in Vegas on ESPN2 at some point, or ESPNX that I don't know about. But are there actually referees that walk around making judgments when you're in these tournaments?
Yeah, they're tournament directors. It's usually more often just people helping with scorekeeping and results rather than having to deal with like rulings or disqualifications or anything like that. DQs and things like that are pretty uncommon in tournaments. It does happen, but it's most.
And these are really serious tournaments. You can win money. You can gain some degree of prominence at real pinball wizard stuff, right?
Absolutely. Most of the weekly tournaments that I play in are usually between 10 and 20 10 and 25 players, and it's a $5 buy-in, and then the prize money is typically distributed between the top 3 or 4 players.
It gets bigger than that, but there are tournaments, right? Yeah,
absolutely. There are tournaments that have 200 or 300 players with 10, 20, $50 buy-ins, where some of that money sometimes goes towards running the tournament, but there's tournaments that have pretty significant prize pools attached to them. a recent example for me was the Washington State Pinball Championships. Every year there's state championships, and Washington has had the biggest prize pool out of any of the 50 states. I believe it was something around, it was the top 24 players in the state get invited to participate in the tournament for Washington. And there was I think it was about $12,000 in prize money that was given out to spread out across the top 24 players. I think first place earned about $3,200 or somewhere around there.
Wow. Let's start getting into some money that you actually have to report. Holy cow. It's
that's not insignificant. Josh, is there a like national pinball association, kind of like the NBA or something like that,
Yeah, so there's the main body that ranks and rates players is the International Flipper Pinball Association. So that's where most players are looking to for their ratings and rankings and everything like that. There are other smaller ways that some more local communities might keep track of skill levels and things, but the IFPA is kind of the major one.
So is it I'll ask a question. It's on the periphery that can get us in trouble, Steve. Is it gender split, or is it one group?
So there's open tournaments, and then that is just for anyone and everyone to play in. And then they also have women's tournaments, and they're a little bit more inclusive to the LGBTQ plus community and things like that. So it's
I'm just thinking of the gender, and you mentioned before that it's actually physical. It's hard, and you've been doing this for a very long time. I don't know if you even remember, but when you lived in Colorado, and I'll embarrass you here, and you were 2 years old, you and I used to go to, remember Gunther Tootie's, where you used to go to the little pinball machine that they had in the restaurant where we were eating, and you used to love to put quarters in there and play it, and you were 2, and just smack it around. And so is it physical? I mean, do you sweat in this after you've done 3 or 4 games?
It's not. There is some amount of physicality to it in the nudging and bumping of the machine, but different players will nudge and bump the game different amounts. Some players, they'll be constantly bumping and manipulating the game in that manner, where some players barely, if at all, ever nudge the game. And it's also going to be a little bit dependent on how sensitive that tilt is. If it's super sensitive, a player that normally is moving the game a lot might not be bumping or nudging the game at all to avoid getting that tilt.
It's interesting.
So let's shift a little bit to the tech. Now, my research that I did in preparation for this show showed that there was actually a patent that was issued in 1871 for what was called a spring plunger. And when I read the summary of the patent, it seems very similar to what you just described. As the tech, obviously it's more precise and the machining is done better, and it's, everything's put together in a more 2025 technological framework. But for the most part, am I correct in 150 years that the technology really hasn't changed that much?
In some aspects, it's very, very similar. Most, nearly every machine still has that plunger that's going to look extremely similar, but not all of them do. Some of them are just a button activated plunge, and it uses a solenoid or some other mechanism to send the ball into play. But a lot of games nowadays are internet connected, and you can compete for leaderboards at the local arcade. And it's pretty common nowadays for machines to be released mostly complete, but still with some some code that still needs to be finished, and they'll sell the games and receive feedback from collectors and tournament players and everyone as they progress and update the machine, and can, if one particular mode on a game is scoring significantly higher than it should be, they can tune it down, or if something isn't as effective as it should be, they can make it more lucrative, or change various aspects of the gameplay.
What about the materials? I mean, we here at the Don Sullivan Show are big aficionados in material science and all our subjects. So had the materials for the actual plungers, or the things that push the ball, or the balls themselves, or even the faces, I guess is the improper term, but you know what I mean? Have the materials really changed so that they are much better and slicker, or how'd they? Tell us.
The materials for just kind of the core components of the pinball machines is fairly similar. Older games were all electromechanically driven, so all entirely comprised of relays and.
What do you mean older? How old?
See, the changeover, I believe, started happening in the 70s.
50 years old. So go ahead.
Yeah. With the advent of the motherboard and everything, and that slowly became more and more popular for pinball machines, where it was just a computer board that was put into it, instead of having, just massive, amounts of wire and relays and mechanically driven. The computer changed that and added for a lot more functionality and everything. There was a brief period of time where manufacturers were releasing games both as a electromechanical game and as a solid state game.
Really?
Where it was the same machine, the same rules. Just the displays were a little bit different, because the electromechanical games used score reels, where it was a big, circular piece that would spin around that had just the numbers painted on it. Yeah. Where the solid state games would have typically 7-segment displays that would show the scores. In part because they weren't sure that the solid state games would catch on. They weren't sure if people would like having the solid state game as opposed to the electromechanical.
Do they?
That's very much personal preference, but in general, people, the solid state games just allowed for much more depth and complexity in the rules. So just as time went on, they could just do a lot more with the games. So it really did catch on. But some early solid state games still had physical chimes in them to make some noise, to make it feel like it's a solid state, or an electromechanical game a little bit more.
It's so funny.
Yeah, the dings kind of make it cool.
It's so funny because all of the timepiece, the watches that we do episodes on, they've actually tried to reintroduce that as a complication into watches because it was so nostalgic. And in this case, they're introducing it as something new. It's great.
Yeah, it's funny. Just out of curiosity, Joshua, does the layout have to be the same for tournaments, or I mean, I'm just thinking of the occasions where I've played pinball machines, and there are probably not a whole lot of those, but does it always have to, in terms of where the pinball can go and bounce around, is that standard or is that different per machine? And when it comes to tournaments, do they all have to kind of have the same type of layout so that's even, or how does that work?
No, so tournaments are all played where players are playing on the exact same machine. There's not multiple, with a couple of small exceptions. There's not multiple copies of a title at a tournament. So if you get drawn on a particular machine, there's only one copy that you're playing on, and each individual title has drastically different layouts and configurations and rules and everything. So part of the tournament director's job and getting everything set up is choosing what kind of games will be played in the tournament.
Gotcha. Are there harder versus easier machines from a gameplay standpoint?
Yes. There's a lot of factors that can be associated with difficulty of a machine. But one of the bigger factors is more to do with the layout and everything is the amount of randomness that's involved. Because on some games you can hit, if you hit the shot, it's a ramp that guides the ball, up and around and all the way back down to the flipper, and it's guaranteed to be safe. Where other games, you send it up and it goes into pop bumpers and it sends it out, and who knows where it's going to be going.
A little less
so
predictable. Yeah, you have to be really ready.
Much less predictable.
It's great. It's almost an element of the second law of thermodynamics, entropy involved in here. How random it seems, right? Infinite permutations of possibilities.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, more so with older games than newer games, but it still can be the case on newer games, is at some of these major tournaments, if games are getting played nonstop all day long, the coils for the flippers or the pop bumpers or various components can start to warm up. As they warm up and get hotter, they might respond a little differently. They might typically they just get a little bit weaker. So when you flip the ball, it doesn't go quite as fast as at the start of the day.
So Josh, is this a sport?
I think it's more in lines with something like an e-sport.
EA sport
than a traditional sport. It is still physical though, so it's a little bit more ambiguous there, but it's certainly competitive.
Where I'm going with this, and here, Stephen, I'm going to get us in trouble here, I'm sure. But what I kind of want to know is most sports, all sports really involve tremendous instincts along with, tremendous physical capabilities. But in this sport, hobby, endeavor, there seems to be a lot of instinct involved. And I'm just going to come right out and ask the question because I know the vast audience of the Don Sullivan Show wants me to, and we're going to. So the question is do we really think that a deaf, dumb, and blind kid can play real mean pinball?
That would be very difficult because it'd be hard to get any amount of feedback.
You mean
that's a
Peter
heck
Townsend
of a
and Elton John have lied to us for 50 years?
Don. Oh man.
Yeah, you can't beat that out, Steve. But I really want to know.
Here's my line, Don. Can you play pinball while smoking a cigar or drinking a beer?
This is like bowling.
Bocce is not a sport to me because you can do that while drinking and smoking a cigar. Golf, on the other hand, is 100% a sport. You can't pinball. It seems like you need both your hands. Correct?
Yes. Yes and no. It is possible to play pinball just with one hand. You have to physically move your hand from one side of the machine to the other if you want to use the left flipper versus the right flipper. So it makes it significantly harder, to play it and in a competitive sense. But my friends and I will do that occasionally. We'll just randomly play a game one-handed just for fun when we're hanging out at the arcade.
Gotcha. Party tricks involved. So, okay. Well,
that's cool.
And I want to stay with the athletic and instinctive point, though, and obviously the famous song in one with the famous line is implying that there is a greater level of instinct than anything else that is a factor in being successful in pinball. And I guess where I'm going with it, if we're trying not to be so ridiculously flippant, and I rarely do that, but I will at the moment. Other than hundreds of hours of practicing, how do you avoid getting disqualified or having these tilts happen depending on how much you smack or hit the machine with your hips, and especially given that all the machines are slightly different. Is it really just practice? And again, you develop those instincts, which is why you could reasonably ask the question, could somebody with very little sensory capability actually become good at it?
Yeah. So as far as with specifically tilts, there are plenty of players that don't move the game at all, so they never risk tilting if they don't move the game. But it comes with practice. There is some sort of intuition on how the ball is going to respond to any given action. Whether it be flipping the ball, what angle it's going to be coming off at, or if it's bumping the game, exactly how the ball is going to respond and how far it's going to bounce across or where it's going to bounce to. But a lot of it is the single biggest aspect, of course, is going to be being able to see the ball. Plenty of players in major tournaments will play with headphones on, so they don't hear the game, they don't hear any of the audio. It's kind of drown everything.
They don't want
out.
to be distracted. They just want to be
Exactly.
able to focus on the ball moving. Yeah,
exactly. So the biggest thing is just being able to kind of see and instinctually kind of get an idea for how the ball might react, and a lot of that is just practice. But some people are certainly going to be just naturally more inclined to know how it's going to respond than others. But just playing pinball a lot really does, practice makes perfect. The more you play, the better of an understanding you're going to get at how things are going to react, and every game does respond different. Even the same title at two different arcades can respond completely differently depending on
Why
how
is
it's
that?
been maintained.
They just maintain them differently. Okay, yeah.
Well, in part, it's going to be how well it's maintained, how frequently it's given attention, and as parts wear down, it's not an instant. It goes from working to not working for many of the components. It's kind of a gradual. Components will kind of gradually peter out a little bit. The flippers
Kind of
will
like a
gradually
car,
yeah.
Always with baseball analogies here, but it's a truism that there are certain places that certain players don't like to go. I mean, left-handed hitters love playing in Yankee Stadium because they think they can hit home runs all day, and the right-handed hitters are the opposite. I think most prominently, pitchers don't like to come to Coors Field because the way the curveballs and such that they throw they don't move in the same way at the altitude. Are there certain machines that you don't like to play, or most people don't like to play because they're just much more difficult, or they don't fit your style?
Certainly. There's hundreds and hundreds of different titles for pinball machines, so they're all going to play differently and have different mechanisms and aspects and objectives to them. So not everyone's going to like every individual title, and on top of that, if a game is not well maintained, it might not be fully functional, or if an arcade doesn't clean the games very often, or it might respond a little bit more sluggishly, and so people might like a specific title but not like an individual copy of that title, depending on a variety of factors.
Is that it's titled a brand, or is that something else when you use that term? Just so I understand.
It's just the title is just the individual or the machine itself. So the Godzilla
gotcha.
pinball machine. It's just to say, all Godzilla machines at all the different arcades versus an individual copy of that Godzilla pinball machine.
Gotcha. Is there are there major? I'm assuming there's more than one manufacturer of pinball machines, but what are the major ones?
And where do they come from?
Yeah, so the biggest manufacturer right now is going to be Stern Pinball, and they were kind of the last, the only surviving of the kind of original, major pinball manufacturers. But there's a lot
Are
more.
they Japan?
No, they're locally. They're I believe they're in
Okay.
Chicago.
Okay.
But there are some newer manufacturers as well. Barrels of Fun, American Pinball, Spooky Pinball, are the ones that comes off the top of my head. That are a lot newer and have come around a lot more recently. That are also putting out real fun games too.
And they seem to have themes usually. They're not plain. You mentioned the Godzilla one, or there's a Harry Potter one, or an Addams Family one, or something like that.
It's like
so
slot machines.
that seems like it seems like an integral part of this, that there's some kind of theme / design / going on with these.
Yeah, so each individual title, it has its own theme. The vast majority of machines are licensed either based off of movies or bands. Or there's another recurring one that we see from a few different manufacturers.
Does the Who have a machine? Not to beat that dead horse too much, but just out of curiosity,
I would think Steve. Is
there
a Who? Is there an Elton John machine?
There is, yes. Jersey Jack, was it last year or the year before? I believe it was. Came out with an Elton John pinball machine.
Wow. So I'm assuming this company has to get the copyrights and whatever from the artist or the movie, whoever owns that intellectual property, and the industry, and
definitely.
then once an agreement is made, they can make this and sell them. How much do these pinball machines go for?
It depends on exactly which manufacturer you're looking at. Like the Stern is, like I said, they're the biggest manufacturer right now. They typically release machines with kind of three versions. There's the Pro, the Premium, and the Limited Edition. The Pro is kind of the base model. It's the base version. It's still pretty inclusive, but the Premium and Limited Edition typically have a couple of extra goodies and mechanisms and toys and stuff. And they'll have slightly different artwork, or in some cases, drastically different artwork for the same theme. The Pro machines, they're typically starting at about $7,000 or $8,000. Some of the more limited edition games can be 14,000, 15,000. There are a couple of machines that were super limited run that were, I think, closer to about 20,000. But those are more collectors machines.
Kind of like the Royal Oaks of the pinball world, where we're getting
another watch plug by the Silicon Valley watch plug member Stephen Feig.
And in any case, that's fascinating. So, and I'm sure there are probably some maybe one-offs that they could, or custom ones where you could spend even more. I'm sure the sky's the limit if there's a market for it. Somebody will find a way to supply that.
Typically, if people want customization on their pinball machines, there's companies and individuals that will make little mods or little bits that can be added to a machine, and the vast majority of them are just cosmetic. But there is a modding scene out there. Some people will upgrade the speakers on the games because, like I was saying, one of the common themes is various bands. So people will get the pinball machine for their favorite band that's been released, and upgrade the speakers so it has good high quality speakers, or add little gadgets or toys in them to kind of add some uniqueness to them.
Gotcha. Kind of like you could buy a Mercedes and then have what's the company's name? Barabbas. Completely customize the thing and take it up to a whole kind of different level. That's interesting. We'll have to look into those options when we get the Don Sullivan show pinball machine, Don.
Yes, we'll have to have an official Don Sullivan show pinball machine, and Josh will be the first person to play it. So, Josh, where is this sport going? It's growing, I think. Are we going to see 10 years from now a ESPN 6 special in which you're going to be playing for $1 million in some casino in Vegas?
I'd certainly hope so. It has been growing, and with streaming becoming, having more recently been much more accessible. There's a lot of people that will stream, on Twitch or live on YouTube or something like that. They'll stream tournaments to make it a little bit more accessible. But that's currently still just through individual channels and not through big networks.
So, one day that it'd be perfect for the Ocho, ESPN Ocho, Don.
Yes,
I was going to slide a question in, Joshua. Do you have a pinball machine at home? Do most people that are kind of high in the pinball world kind of have machines at their house, or do you just go places?
I do have a couple of my own machines. So a lot of people in the community do, but not everyone does. Some of the really big tournaments will offer pinball machines as the grand prize. Or Stern might sponsor the tournament, and whoever wins the tournament wins a pinball machine. Or there's a local tournament that takes place every year where an older solid state machine gets donated to be the grand prize for the tournament. So most, a lot of people in the community do have them. There's people that will rent pinball machines out. So you can, for $100 a month, you can have, a pinball machine at your house, but not have to deal with, paying the $7,000-8,000 for a game. Yeah. And then, when they're renting it, they don't have to worry about performing all the maintenance and repairs themselves. That's up to the person that's renting it out.
But speaking of all that, what's your schedule like in terms of both practice and participating in competitions, tournaments or otherwise?
Yeah, so I host a weekly tournament every Saturday night at 8:00 at my local arcade. So I'm playing in a weekly 3-strike tournament every Friday, or most Fridays. I also play in a tournament at a different location. There's a league that I play in that takes place on Mondays, and that's typically what I'm doing as far as a regular, consistent, competitive play. But a couple extra days a week, I'll just go to the arcade and play and have fun. In a non-competitive scenario.
And I should have asked this earlier, Joshua. In terms of winning, or it's basically, as I recall, it's making sure the ball doesn't drop through and getting it to hit different things, and that adds to your score. Could you, for our listeners that are less familiar, and maybe they're just as unfamiliar as I am, I could be in that category. How do you get points? Are there certain things you can do that get you more points, etc.?
Yeah, so every machine has objectives that you can go for. On the older games, sometimes that's as simple as you hit this one target and that lights another thing for points, and you just do that over and over again. other games, especially the newer games, have like really deep rule sets where you have to do something to light a mode, and then you hit a different shot that lets you start the mode, and then you have to go through a certain pattern of shots that light up to get through that mode. And then once you beat that mode, it allows access to another mode. And once you get far enough, you can do different things. So it is very, very dependent on which machine you're playing.
That sounds pretty involved too. Not like the ones in the arcade where I was just hitting it and trying to bounce it into stuff. That's some very determined pathways that you have to take using your skills.
All of the machines that are used in the high level competitive play are also games that you'll see at arcades and things like that. So there's not like competition games versus just arcade games.
Pretty democratic.
It's individual copies might be better suited for tournaments than others, just because they have been better maintained or something like that. But no, most of the like in the weekly tournament that I run, all of the pinball machines that are at the arcade are part of the tournament, unless they're broken or not working. So it's not a separate subset of machines that are used. So again, that's one of the tournament directors' jobs is, when they're arranging a major tournament, is deciding what games to pick, because there's so many to choose from. A lot of tournament directors will try and get a variety of games. So some newer games, some older games, some that are in between.
So, Josh, I'm going to give you the last word here, but I want to sort of prompt you with a question along these lines, and then you can add in whatever you like or whatever you think that we've missed here. But I would like to know where you think, what do you think, or what would you like to see as the biggest change in the sport, and the biggest change or biggest adaptation, the biggest enhancement in the technology?
The biggest change I'd love to see is just for the community to continue to grow, and for it to become, even more popular and get even more recognition. As far as the technology goes, it's tough to say. Like I said, the machines nowadays, a lot of them are internet connected. So you can have modes that will rotate, week to week, and they'll play slightly differently, or things like that. So I kind of see that as being at least the short-term future. Is it's just going to be a lot more dynamic gameplay through being able to be internet connected, and kind of changing, some of the specifics on the machines, as far as objectives and things go, week to week.
Okay, well, Stephen, you got anything else?
Sure. I was just going to ask, Joshua, do you have a favorite title, kind of all time, number one?
Yes, my favorite pinball machine of all time is the Bally 8-Ball from 1977.
Oh, wow. Going back 50 years old. That's cool.
Yes.
I will have to look that up.
Well, yes, it's as you might be able to tell by the name 8-Ball, it's a pool-themed pinball machine.
Well, Joshua Francis, thank you so much for coming on to the Don Sullivan Show and regaling us with this area of technology that most people wouldn't necessarily think of as an area of technology, but we do here in the Don Sullivan Show. And I certainly would love to invite you to come back on at any point in time that you see a major change in the technology or something that's interesting. This is what you do, obviously, as your hobby or your sport, your passion, but you're also a cell phone expert too. And so we may ask you to come on and comment and do some reviews when we see some major cell technologies to come out, if you don't mind. I'd love to have you back on again. You're a great guest.
All right, yeah, that would be fun.
Yep. So, Steven, you want to take us out here, and then I'll finish.
It would be my pleasure. Thanks again, Josh, and continue to tune in our wonderful viewers.
Yes, well, everyone, and I have something to tell you. I have something to remind you of, that no matter where we are, whether or not I'm running into canyons or going up mountains, and in the relatively near future, I'm going to be going up a really, really big mountain. I'll wait for you. I'll wait to tell you all about that, because the next four upcoming episodes are going to be all about that. But it is really important to understand that no matter what sport we're playing, including pinball, that no matter what, you have to remember, folks, that all at-bats are situational. See ya.